our sense of the world to make sense of the world. Why? For inner and outer world peace through individual strength, feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. Welcome back to the Best Feeling Podcast, the Best Feeling Network, your only no-nonsense podcast. With your host, Herbie. This is Pal Go On. Pal Go On. Welcome back. Today is November 18th, Friday, 2022. Friday, November 18th, 2022, 9 a.m. Good morning. How are you? Welcome back to Pal Go On. Pal Go On every day, every weekday at 9 a.m. We discuss our relationship between ourselves and other topics. Today on Freedom Friday, where the theme is freedom and feeling so free and good and feeling so free from the inside out. And today's theme, we shall be talking about kill that ego. Let's kill the ego. Why? Why? Today we're going to talk about why to kill the ego. To be free, of course, on this Freedom Friday. Then later on, we're going to talk about what the ego is, because I'm sure this is a refresher for a lot of you, as a lot of us are already familiar with what an ego is, but we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive today. And lastly, we'll talk about how to kill the ego. Of course, we're not just going to let you high and dry with all of these kind of unpleasant topics as they may be sometimes. Like killing the ego might sound kind of crazy, but we're not going to just leave you high and dry, will we? We're going to leave you and lead you with some body magic tricks. Why? To feel so freaking good from the inside out, better than your morning would feel without. We're going to leave you some body magic tricks today in this simulation of ours, which we all find ourselves in this is shared world, this is shared space. In this world that we find ourselves in, this simulation of ours, in which we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with every breath that you take. We hope that you will join us as we invite you to hold that controller properly with us today in that simulation in which we die every 5 minutes. We die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with a breath. We invite you to hold your controller properly with us today. How do we hold our controller properly today? In this simulation of ours, of course, you guessed it, we pretend that there's a candle in front of our lips that we're trying to not put out. Just a lit candle, like a birthday candle, just flickering in front of your lips. And you're just trying to not put it out. You're not thinking about exhaling or inhaling necessarily, simply the intention into your awareness that you are trying to not put this candle out that's flickering right in front of your lips. As you observe your sense of self, you know that sweet sense of self. Observe your sense of self, as in even if you close your eyes, you notice how your left elbow still feels like it's different from your right elbow in that physical space. Or that even when you close your eyes, you can tell that your right eye is different than your left eye and how it feels and the shape, size, and position of it on your body. And likewise, your sense of self, as in when you close your eyes, you might notice easily that your head is very different from your feet, and your sense of self, that sixth sense, that kinesthesia. So we pretend to hold our controller properly in this simulation of ours in which we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with every breath that we take. We hold this controller properly first by pretending that there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. Every single person with a candle in front of their lips that they're trying to not put out as they observe their sense of self, their kinesthesia, their sense of their own body. We observe our sense of self as we have the intention of not putting this candle out that's flickering in front of the lips. You're just imagining a candle just flickering in front of your lips as you observe your sense of self, and how does that feel for you? And remembering this week to leave our swallowing muscles alone as we discussed on Monday. And of course, listening to the front of the shins as if they are the speakers or the tuning forks of the world as we observe our sense of self. And how does that feel for you? Wherever you are, whether you are at work on a table, whether you are lying down on a bed, relaxing, or whether you're at work and we're in the background just zooming in and flattening and spreading ourselves across this symphony of the world around you. Let us blend in. We will be back right after this short break to talk about Let's Kill the Ego here on Freedom Friday, November 18th, 2022. A Freedom Friday here on Pal Go On. I'm your host, Herbie, and we'll be right back after this very short break. Good morning. Let's go. Friday, baby. We'll be right back. vitamins and gummies that claim they're going to be boosting your mental capabilities, your physical performance, your behaviors in life? Tried them and then felt motivated yet slightly confused and cautious? I mean, are the effects even real or are they a placebo? Are you achieving what you think you are achieving or is it imagination? Do you have all this energy now or is that imagination too? Be done with placebos. Be done with uncertainty. Isn't it so draining to be uncertain? You can't even begin to gain confidence in what you're doing. How about some actionable, specific advice instead? Take this gummy, feel the front of your shins. Bam! That one's free. Take Padawan with you wherever you go, whenever you go, and feel so good from the inside out. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without. Using our sense of the world to make sense of the world. Why? For inner and outer world peace through individual strength. We hope you will allow all of these words to go in one ear and out to the other today, as we are holding on to the meanings of what is being said all throughout this little space meditation conversation we're about to have, as we feel so good while we talk about all sorts of places our brain will go. Why? In order to achieve most freedom, which we know is closest to truth, which is closest to love, which is closest to authenticity and happiness and peace in our lives, our daily lives. Not just thought experiments, just to show off or flex how much we know about life, but for some actionable, specific advice instead. Actual, applicable advice in order to feel so good throughout our daily lives, as we know that every part of the human condition has a physical component which we care about first and foremost. What is this pain that you feel in your body? Is it because of the ego? Now, most people will not find their way to feeling so good from the inside out. That's just the truth of it. Most people are so in love with the hell that they live in that we're just too busy trying to get more of it instead of actually trying to be free. We don't actually have confidence in being free. Most people will not find the path to being free, as we cannot convince nobody of nothing, as we know. But if you are here and you are ready to hear this information, we invite you. And we are happy to have you. Not everyone will get it, but for those who do, welcome. And if you don't get it yet, welcome either way. Even if it doesn't stick with you. For most it will not stick. It's okay. It's not everybody will be at that stage. It's all good wherever the ego is. We hope you will take what means something to you and revisit us or replay these episodes if they help. But we hope you will hold on to something. We hope you will find something meaningful today. So as we hold our controller properly before we begin this conversation, we invite you to pretend that there's a candle in front of your lips. We challenge you to pretend there's a candle in front of your lips that you're just trying to not put out. It's a flickering candle. You're not thinking about inhaling or exhaling necessarily, but there's just a flickering candle. You're not thinking about exhaling or inhaling necessarily, but simply that there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. Just the intention of trying to not put out this candle that's placed in front of your lips and observing your sense of self wherever you are, whether you're at the coffee shop on the laptop doing work, what's up? Or whether you are out in the streets and we're chilling in the iPads or in earphones. How are you doing today? What's good? How's life? I hope it's treating you well. Whether you are at home or whether you're at work, welcome. And how does it feel for you to observe your sense of self as there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out? As we leave our swallowing muscles alone, as we listen to the front of our shins, spreading some of that sweet, sweet awareness to the front of the shins, the sweet, sweet hearing awareness to the front of the shins, and observing the sense of self. How does that feel for you? Thank you for joining us. Please allow Padawan as it as it is a full body experience, please allow these sounds to go in one ear and out the other, first of all. But second of all, blend into that symphony of life that is around you. Please, we invite you to stay present. We are just this podcast in your ears or in the air around you, but you are still where you are and you are still staying present. That feels so good, as the godliest place to be is here in the present, as the most truthful thing that your body can be doing is existing here in the present, as your body does not exist in the future or the past, just exists right here. Everything else is imagination, and we know how fickle that can be. Your body is blessed to be here and now, and to be more aware of that is to be most godlike and feel so good and feel so free and authentic and peaceful from the inside out, which would allow you to feel so good. Be yourself. Let's kill the ego. Why? To be free, of course. To be free of comparing ourselves to others. How much stress do we allow into our lives by simply comparing ourselves to others in this imaginary worldview of ours in which other people's lives are in any direct correlation with our own? We all have our own story. So comparing ourselves to others not only just puts you down in the dumps and it sucks, or you might use it to indulge in your feelings of feeling superior, which would also stem from us feeling inferior at other points, which is why we would need to compensate by trying to feel superior over others by comparing ourselves to others. Although everyone's story is so unique, as we did not choose what body we were born in, the family we were born in, the situations that we have to handle, especially as young little baby godlike child things in which we did not understand ourselves or the world yet. And so comparing ourselves to others seems like a fruitless attempt at feeling better or finding peace, as no one's story is quite the same. And so comparing their state in their story, there's just too many factors. It's like infinity factors to be able to compare it to your life in any meaningful way without looking within first to understand others outside, but within them. To understand others, we would have to look within ourselves in order to orient ourselves towards a story that we understand, and then transpose that story to theirs and hopefully find some semblance of understanding. But in the end, we would need to kill the ego to be free of comparing ourselves to others, which we know always just leads to emotional turmoil or just leads to unnecessary suffering as you try to orient your story, your part in your story, to someone else's part in their story, where the stories don't even match. So the part at which they're at is just so unique compared to yours, because it has to consider the entire story that they're a part of, that is their life. Why also to kill the ego? Well, so that you can be free to go after what you want. On Palgoan, we're talking about, I mean, when you think about it, it is kind of philosophy, but it's daily life philosophy that actually matters to the daily life, because what matters to the daily life, of course, we all care about being morally right. We care about like ethical standards of like the world. We feel the need to feel like we are correct in that way, but to actually help us in our daily lives, isn't every decision made in our daily lives highly dependent on how much pain we are feeling, as there's a physical component related to every part of the human experience. And so throughout our daily lives, especially these days when most of us are feeling uninspired and tired over the last 2 years because of all the shutdowns and all that stuff, we need to feel free again of our daily emotional problems. Philosophy is great and all that stuff, but what's the point if it doesn't actually affect you and your decision making and how you feel now, immediately? As we all know that we're being crushed and oppressed by all these feelings that we have of like the potential that we want to reach. We have dreams and goals that don't necessarily seem within reach yet. We have desires to be with certain people that we are not with. We have desires to feel at peace when we are alone, etc., etc. All our daily lives, we have pain and problems that we have to deal with on a daily basis, and those problems are very physical. How do you know that you don't want to go to work? It's a physical feeling. How do you know that you want to work, but you don't want to work at this job? It's a physical feeling as well. How do you know that you don't want to keep getting up at this time? Or how do you know that you want to work for more money, or that you don't feel that you're being properly compensated, or that you're not able to buy the things or have the freedom that you want because of the job that you work in. There is a physical feeling day to day that is allowing you to understand that about yourself, and there's a physical feeling preventing you from making moves that you want to make. So why else to kill the ego besides being free of comparing ourselves to others, which is emotionally disastrous? Or why else to kill the ego besides being free to go after what you want, which would be a miracle, to be able to address the pain that we feel physically and be able to soothe that pain, which would free us up to do what we know what we want to do on a daily basis. Don't we feel that we aren't doing what we know what we should be doing, right? There's like this potential that we want to reach, but we find ourselves distracted with computers, with Instagram, with Twitter, with Facebook, with side projects, with procrastination, with overeating, with masturbation, with anger, with all sorts of things. So we want to, wouldn't it be a miracle to be able to get rid of all of those? Wouldn't it be a miracle to be able to find within us the ability to reduce or to soothe all that pain that causes us to distract ourselves, in order to be free to actually go after what we actually want instead of being afraid or distracting ourselves because of the fear? Why else to kill the ego? Well, so that we can be free, again, on Freedom Friday, from being emotionally affected by words unless you give them permission. We want to be completely impervious to being negatively affected by words. And in some sense, positively too, as that can sometimes throw us off balance, throw us off our game, and prevent us from performing as highly as we know we should. So why should we kill this ego thing? To be free of comparing ourselves to others, to be free to go after what you want, to have that spiritual freedom to go after what you want. And so we can be free from being emotionally affected from words, unless you give them permission. So that we have freedom to be ourselves authentically in our lives, free of fear of being authentic and being ourselves, and knowing that we can handle it. And I know you can handle it. We know you can handle it. I know you can handle it. So what is this ego thing? We're talking about we got to kill the ego in order to be such and such, in order to be free of comparing ourselves, in order to be free to go after what we want, in order to be free of being emotionally affected by words. What is this ego that we have to kill in order to achieve all of those? What is this ego? What is this? What is this ego, though? You're not going to like it. You're not going to like what the answer is. What is this ego? What is ego? Fear. What is ego? Fear. One more time. What is ego? Fear. As we are remembering to leave our swallowing muscles alone wherever you are, if you would repeat after me, leave the swallowing muscles alone. We observe our sense of self. Let's say it one more time before we move on to talking about what the ego is. Say it with me. We challenge you to say it with me. Even if it's in your head, leave the swallowing muscles alone. As you observe your sense of self, do you notice your neck or your spine bending a certain way? Maybe it's getting closer to matching this diagram behind me, in which we want to place our weight down the blue lines, down the weight of the weight-bearing portion of the spine, which is the front, and into the rainbow arches. Remember, we do not sit on our legs as we leave our swallowing muscles alone and observe our sense of self. How does that feel for you? As we stretch our self-awareness like a muscle today, what is this ego? What is this ego? Fear. I know no one wants to hear that answer, but fear. It's the right answer. What is ego? This fear. Herbie, are you saying so anytime I get afraid, I'm being egotistical? I mean, maybe. What is this ego? Fear. We try to deal with danger by anticipating it and acting accordingly. We've lived our lives. We've experienced some. We've learned to imagine some. So we have a past, an imaginary future. And throughout life, because of fear of possibly not getting what we wanted, possibly getting something we weren't able to handle, fear of missing an opportunity by being unaware, fear of failure most of all, We've lived our lives, and because of what we've gone through and what we can expect of ourselves, we fear. We fear what has happened to us. We fear what might happen to us. We fear what we did not get, and we fear what we might not get. Sometimes we fear what we got, and we also fear what we might get, both in the past and in the future, right? As you zoom on in and get closer and closer to this moment, this instantaneous moment, there's like one moment that is moving forward through time, but we exist only in that one sliver of a moment at all times. We don't actually exist in the past. We don't actually exist in the future. Those are illusions, possibly even created by the ego, as the human mind, the human spirit learned how to somewhat control its present, or somewhat control its future by revisiting thoughts from the past and visiting imaginations about the future, trying to predict patterns so that we can get what we want in life. But when it's driven by fear, because we try to deal with danger by anticipating and acting accordingly, whether that be maybe we don't speak as loudly next time, maybe we decide to protect our pride this time by aggressing on someone who we see as a threat. Perhaps we try to look extra still because we found that when doing so, we were able to prevent ourselves from having to deal with a fearful situation like being called on in class. So we might learn how to be extra still so we don't get called on because we're afraid of dealing with that. Or possibly we learned how to be extra loud and extra obnoxious in order to deal with the fear of actually having to be intimate or actually having to be genuine or sincere. As a baby godlike child as you were, as a baby godlike child in which we all were at one point in time, the ego had not formed yet. Why had the ego not formed yet? Well, there wasn't as much of an idea of what the self was. When you were a baby child, godlike baby child thing, you're just enjoying and experiencing life as it happened to you. But when we became self-aware, we began to discover patterns in life that caused our new idea of a self, which we didn't really have when we were super baby child things. But when you get a little bit older, you start seeing in the mirror and you start noticing your own self more and what you can do to affect things that happen to you based on previous experience or based on what you imagine about the future. We created this ego thing, this version of ourselves driven by a fear of dangerous futures. Dangerous futures which we discovered to exist as soon as we became more self-aware. We realized that there was something to protect. When you were this little baby child thing, there was no idea of having to protect the self, having to protect this experience, because this experience was all there was. There was no idea of, oh my gosh, one day this experience might not exist. What do I have to do to ensure that this experience continues to exist? We didn't have that as this little baby godlike child thing. When we became less of a baby godlike child thing, we started looking at ourselves more, created this ego, this version of us that was made to protect ourselves from imaginary futures created by our experiences of the past. This alternate version of us that's just trying to protect us, just trying to protect the survival of ourselves, this ego driven and created by fear. As a baby godlike child thing, you did not have such yet. And so you were your authentic self, free to be who you were, though you didn't have much of an option of what that was yet because you were still a little baby child thing. So our goal is to become like a baby child-like thing again. We're trying to be free, authentic, and free, authentic, and at peace, like a little baby godlike child thing. But we want to do that as adults. So our effort should go towards returning to that state. Returning to that baby godlike child state in which the ego was none. Why? Because that ego was created off of fear. And how did that fear begin to manifest? Well, when our self-awareness became more mature and we decided that our own existence was something to preserve, which is it's a very understandable pathway for the human soul to take. It's like, all right, there's all these great things about life. I don't like feelings of discomfort. what can we do to preserve where we are, because we know that we had some good, so we want that to return. However, what this does is block you out from the new good that you cannot see, because the past doesn't necessarily predict the future, especially when we are only speaking in terms of our ego, which only exists to satisfy our fears, as we did not feel able to handle what was thrown at us, or we felt unable to handle what life threw our way, as we experienced moments which were devastating to us, and they were emotionally crippling for us, traumatizing for us. In all of our individual stories, don't you have a moment in your life where you feel like you were traumatized, or that you had some epiphany about life in which, because of fear of not wanting to experience that again, caused you to go after a whole new direction of life, almost like a whole new personality, almost like your ego activating? So what is this ego thing? This alternate version reality of you that's just meant to preserve you, but based off of past experiences which are unreliable because they're marred by your memories and emotions, and we know how unreliable and fickle those are. Trying to anticipate a future which is imaginary and unyet created, as that is also created by our ability to get rid of the ego, will change the future. What is this ego? Well, this alternate version of you meant to just preserve you because it's afraid of the death of you. It's there to protect you from the death of you by trying to deal with danger by anticipating it and acting accordingly. All developed by fear, as it is this self-conscious ego that is trying to preserve the self. It is afraid that it will not be able to handle what comes next, so it creates this alternate personality in order to anticipate and deal with the future in ways that seemed to have worked in the past. But what does that work mean? Are we at peace, or are we not at peace? Should we kill the ego? Should we identify, then kill the ego? Well, let's feel so freaking free on Freedom Friday. Let's go kill that ego so that we can feel free to be ourselves again, to go after what we want, to not compare ourselves to others, to not be emotionally affected by word, and simply to just be as life happens on its own. We'll be back after this short break to talk more about what to do in an effort to kill this ego. But only if you're leaving your swallowing muscles alone and observing your sense of self. We'll be back right here on the Best Feeling Podcast with your host, Herbie. This is Pal Go On. Depressed? Has the chaos of the world got you feeling confused and apathetic? even gassy? Feeling like nothing gets you out of this funk? When you're feeling lost in the daily grind, left feeling meaningless, don't touch grass, touch the front of your shins. Feel less tired and more inspired with us on the Best Feeling Podcast. Pal, go on. Feeling so good from the inside out. Better than your morning would feel without using our sense of the world to make sense of the world. Why? For inner and outer world peace. Of course. Stretching our self-awareness like a muscle every weekday morning. I hope you're feeling wonderful out there. Hope you're feeling wonderful out there, wherever you are. Whether you are working hard, or whether you are laying back and relaxing, whether you are joining us for the first time, or whether you are a seasoned veteran here on Pal Go On. So check it out. We know that you are aware of this simulation of ours that we are all living in which we die every 5 minutes, but that timer is reset with every breath that you take. We know that you find yourself in this simulation, so in this simulation, we invite and challenge you to hold your controller properly with us today. How do we hold our controller properly today? Well, whatever you are doing, you beautiful time traveler, you, if you're watching in the future, if you're alive, you beautiful time traveler, you, wherever you are. To hold this controller properly, we shall pretend that there's a candle, just a lit candle floating in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. Like a birthday candle, and you're just trying to not put it out as you observe your sense of self. You know that sense of self, that feeling that when you close your eyes, you still know where your nose is, and when you close your eyes, you still know where your groin is and where your knees are. Why? Because you have this sense of self, this sixth sense, this kinesthesia, this sense of self. Observe your sense of self. We challenge you to observe your sense of self as you pretend that there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. How does that feel for you? We challenge you to listen to the front of the shins, in front of your shins, as if they're speakers that the sounds of the world come through, or like a tuning fork. We challenge you to spread some of that sweet, sweet hearing awareness towards the front of your shins, as if they're vibrating to the sounds around you, including my voice or whatever's happening around you. And observe your sense of self. And how does that feel for you as we stay present by listening to the sounds around us, but through the front of our shins? Please allow all these words to go in one ear and out the other. Whoop-sh. As we blend into the symphony of sounds that exist around you as we stay present always. Especially on Freedom Friday, we are here to stay present. As we finish off this week. Woo! Feels good to be on a Friday. Let's go. Even if you work on the weekends, you still got the Friday spirit. You understand. How are you? Where are you? Me, myself, I'm doing great, thank you. We love being here nice and early in the morning, and thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. I thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you were having a fantastic time. Hope you're having as much fun as I am. Today on this Friday, November 18th, 2022, we're talking about let's kill the ego. Why? To be free from comparing ourselves to others. To be free to go after what you want. Go and kill it. You deserve it. You're gonna get it. Just work hard for it. And why do we kill the ego? Also to be free from being emotionally affected by words, unless you give them permission. Now, what is this ego? A part of our personality developed from fear. A part of our personality developed from fear. And where does this fear stem from? Previous experiences that might have hurt ourselves. And so we concern ourselves with preserving ourselves, which is what the ego does. Preserve the self. Built off of fear. The fear of what we have experienced in the past. And the fear that we might experience it again in the future. So we developed unconsciously this part of our personality that made calculations based on what it has experienced in life and causes us to behave in certain ways in order to avoid more of those negative experiences that we didn't feel that we could handle. In other words, trauma. So So we have this part of ourselves that was invented to deal with the trauma that we have experienced. And as our lives are so unique, no two stories are the same, even twins. No two stories are the same. So our egos create this unique personality to deal with the fears in our lives. So when you're speaking to others out there in the world, are you speaking to them or their ego? Their mask, their frame around their body, which controls their body and actions and thoughts and hearts sometimes, in order to deal with trauma that they've experienced. So are you speaking to others truthfully and honestly to them and authentically, or are you speaking or are you experiencing their ego part of their personality, their ego part of their unconscious, which is simply acting in self-preservation due to the fears that they've experienced or the fears that they imagine, which is also based off of what they experienced. So this ego thing, this personality that's been created, that's part of your unconscious, how do we kill that thing? Some actionable, specific advice instead. How do we kill this ego thing? Well, we learn to expend effort towards being effortless. We learn to expend effort. Of course, we expend effort. Like we expend effort in order to become certified. We expend effort to become an A student. We expend effort to be that unique person at school. We expend effort to appear cooler than cool. We expend effort maybe to be more like in the nerd culture, to fit in with certain cultures. We expend effort outwardly to try to match parts of the world that we think will go along with our ego, so that our ego doesn't have to work so hard to feel like it needs to preserve itself. We are always expending energy in order to satisfy this ego thing, this thing that wants to avoid the thing that is feared in the past, although also shuts you out from the goodness of the future, because you're always reacting when you're being led by the ego. You're always reacting, and you're always reacting to the past, which resists good in the future, as you are simply just being a shadow of this past, which is no longer here as we live in the present. So although we expend effort in order to do everything, including satisfying our ego, what we can learn to do to kill this ego is expend that effort still, but expend it towards being effortless. As in, expend that effort, all that effort that we use towards the outside world, trying to control this unstoppable tidal wave that is the outside world, try to control it and stop it from causing our experience to be unpleasant. We're always expending effort outwardly, but what we can do to kill the ego is expend that effort inwardly to hold the ego back in order to allow the goodness that is coming our way to actually be received into our lives like a home. Why? Because our intended effort that we expend outwards to the outside world tend to just be projections of our ego. Whenever we try to expend our effort towards the outside world, whenever we try to impose our will onto this outside world, we are this tiny, small peon individual compared to this entire chaotic world that is always buzzing with other people who are also experiencing their version of life, but is also enacting onto the world. This world itself is so chaotic and unpredictable. And so when we try to expend our effort towards this outside world, our intended effort tends to just be projections of our ego. As we are this one little peon thing trying to affect or impose our will onto this gigantic tidal wave of a world, an impossible feat to be able to change or influence the wave that is this tidal wave of the world around us that is just chaotic. Our intended effort tends to just be projections of our ego. Whenever we try to act and force something onto the world, aren't we just trying to create or predict the future in order for it to be beneficial to ourselves? Why? Because we're trying to anticipate the future. We're trying to use our ego, as in our fear of being unable to handle circumstances or situations as they happen to us. Our fear of being unable to handle those is simply projected to the outside world whenever we try to expend effort into the outside world. More often than not, our effort expended on the outside world more often than not, tend to just be projections of our ego, as in ways that we would prevent bad things to happen to us, deemed by our ego, our fears of what we've experienced personally. Although our experience is this one tiny thing from our vantage point, while the world is this gigantic, all-encompassing thing, sounds like an impossible task to try to change the world in order to anticipate or protect yourselves from the dangers of it in the future, which is some imaginary future thing. So effort should be made, of course. Yes, but towards stifling the ego. Why? In order to allow the good that we want, the good energy and the good things that we want in life to come our way, we must stifle the ego, which has caused us to lock into patterns of the past due to fear, what we've experienced, and trying to stop it from happening in the future instead of learning to be able to be strong enough to handle and overcome. We should stifle that ego instead in order to live in the present and not be living in this personality built off of fear of what we've experienced or what we are trying to, or the danger we're trying to anticipate. Indeed, when we are living with our ego alive and hot and fresh, that ego is constantly changing your personality on the outwards, or how you actually experiencing it to the world, constantly guiding your personality, but guiding it out of fear of not being able to handle the dangers up ahead. But lo and behold, all that we want, all that makes life meaningful, all that brings purpose to your life, all that imbues you with a satisfying feeling of being alive and having purpose in your life, happens to be just beyond the door that is danger. Most good things that come to your life, or most good things that you want to imbue you with a sense of importance and urgency and purpose in life, lie just beyond danger. So if we're always living in this ego, which is created off of the fear of this danger, will we ever get the good that we want? Of course not. Of course not. Of course not. But we hold on to our ego because we want to control life, because we are afraid of the dangers of life. We are afraid of being emotionally scarred again. We are afraid of being physically scarred again. We are afraid of being spiritually weak again, such that we cannot perform any of the tasks that we know we want to do. We cannot start that podcast. We cannot begin that music. We cannot apply for that new job. We cannot ask for that person on a date. We cannot try that new food that seems exciting. We cannot do our homework the way that we want to when we feel spiritually weak. When we feel spiritually weak, we cannot. We cannot, by living through the ego, which is not meant to bring you good in life, but is meant to simply avoid the dangers that you're afraid of. So effort should be made, yes, but not into conforming into this outside world, but rather towards killing and stifling the ego. Again, which is created from fear, this personality part of you created from fear of what you've experienced and what you believe might happen. But we cannot see much as our own. We cannot see much as human beings from your individual vantage point. You cannot see very much from your individual vantage point. So what we believe ourselves so wholeheartedly to believe is dangerous or something to be afraid of in the future is simply a manifestation of our ego, the part of our personality built off of fear, not built off of authenticity, balance, and strength. Not the real you, not what you would do when you are not in fear, not what you would do when you are not feeling weak. This ego is not you, for it is the version of you that feels weak, the version of you that feels unable, the version of you that feels afraid, so makes decisions based off of those fears instead of making decisions based off what you want to do authentically. It's a death. Your ego is a death-fearing personality, but the you that we all know is really in there, you beautiful creature, you is a life-loving creature that performs not based off of fear of the death of what it might get, fear of the death of, does not function off the fear of watching what it loves die, or it's not built off the fear off of being afraid of, it's not built off the fear of watching the opportunities that it wants to embark on die. The true version of you is not built from fear. And why might we hold on to this ego? Again, because we're afraid of not being able to survive what we cannot control. We hold on to this ego because we want to control the future, because we do not feel like life will happen in a positive way should we not try to control, anticipate, and be prepared for the dangers ahead. We can always be prepared for the dangers ahead, but best ways to not try to control this tidal wave of the world, but rather to control the self in order to become strong to deal with everything. Why do we hold on to this ego? Why have we not killed it already? Because we are afraid that life cannot happen on its own. We are afraid that if we take our eyes off of the road, we shall crash. We are afraid that if we let go of the steering wheel, none of the good that we have gotten thus far will ever come again. But life can happen on its own. Just the same way in art, music, dance, gymnastics, so many components of the world that we see, human greatness in the world that we see is not judged positively based on how much effort it looks like it takes, which would be your ego trying to match some outside world expectation because of fear of failure or fear of not being important or fear of not being seen. No. Art, especially physical sports, speeches, heck, everything that we respect the human being for doing, we respect on a much higher level when it looks effortless. Why is this? Dance. We're not like, oh my gosh, look how much effort it looks like that took. More like we say, dang, they make that look easy. How about singing? Wow, this person sounds very stressed when they sing. That's awesome. No one says that. No, we say, wow, that singing, they make it sound so easy. How do they sound like that so effortlessly? How do they hit that note so effortlessly? We base so much of our respect of the human performance based on how effortless it looks. We don't really respect this strenuous, forced performance. No, inherently, by looking within to understand everything without, but inside of others, we look within to understand what's happening inside of others, as we are all the same. And we know that effortlessness is highly respectable. We love it. We love when a dance looks effortless while still looking graceful. We love when a speech looks effortless while still being impactful. We love when people look effortless while making all the money they do. We respect that inherently. Why? I'll give you one word. Ego. Ego. This ego, this part of your personality, this part of your spirit, or maybe it's a whole nother spirit as a whole that takes over you, this ego spirit. We recognize that this ego spirit is one that tries to project onto the world. It's one that tries to control the outcomes of the outside world. One that tries to control other people's thoughts. One that tries to anticipate danger. One that tries to anticipate the dangers of the world. Tries to measure up to some expectation it believes the world has, although we know nothing, as we can barely know our inside selves, but that's the closest we can get. That's the most we can know about is our inside selves. We know there's something beautiful about being effortless. Now, is it effortless to be effortless? No, it takes effort to smush that ego down in order to now be effortless, like a little beautiful godlike baby child that you used to be. We want to get back to that state, right? On Freedom Friday, we want to feel so free as we go into the weekend, right? So dance, music, art, speeches, everything that takes the human spirit, we respect an effortlessness about it. Why? Because we know that the ego, when the ego is involved, it's very effortful, but effortful in the wrong way, in that it's trying to control the outside world. And we see now that there's a conflict in the human body as there's two spirits trying to occupy the same body. One of the spirits is trying to integrate and fully assume the form of the music that it's listening to as it dances or sings, while another spirit is also trying to inhabit the same body, which is trying to protect yourself from the anticipated reactions of others, or it's trying to protect itself from an idea of how people react in the outside world, in public. This ego creates these ideas about how the world's going to respond. And if it's negative, it doesn't feel like it can handle that, then it's going to try to do something in order to change that change how people feel, change the outside world instead of changing the inside world and allowing the world to react and respond thusly or to see its authenticity. This ego ends up creating this mask of you, this alternate version of you, because it is afraid that the inside version of you will not be preserved should the ego not kick in and try to anticipate and try to account for what it believes might happen in the future, whether that be embarrassment, danger, whether that be emotional danger, whether that be reputational danger. And so it's not really you, as there's two spirits fighting for the same body, but we know we want the body to be wholesome, be whole, be integrated with the moment, not trying to split itself into two different moments. As what do we really learn from that as we watch others? How do you really get anything useful from someone who's being inauthentic or someone who's being led by ego, as there's two messages being sent at you at the same time, this person and everything they try to do to anticipate and protect themselves from what they fear? There's two different spirits, and so are you able to discern what's going on? Are you able to decipher that? It's very confusing. It's very hard on the mind. Hard to get anything valuable from watching another person. Not much truth in it, not much love in it. Just ego, just fear. And we all know that there's no love in fear. And so we want to kill this ego. We already recognize something very deep down within us already recognizes how important it is to kill this ego. As we notice it all throughout, through art, all throughout human greatness, all throughout human work, that the human spirit, we tend to respect when something looks effortless. And when we say effortless, does that mean it doesn't take effort at all? No, but rather there was an effort made to kill the ego in order to be in the present moment and let life happen on its own. We know the body can move on its own. Just like when you're sleepy or when you've had too much to drink or any other state, we know the human body can function on its own. We know the human body can live on its own. We know that life can happen on its own, separate from this idea of an ego, separate from this whole part of the unconscious being like not used for what you are, but just like it's like a whole part of you that's just like reserved for this ego, which is meant to hide the real you instead of actually revealing the real you. So it doesn't actually end up being effortless and doesn't look effortless, as it's two spirits conflicting. One side of you that's trying to reveal itself and another side of you that's trying to hide yourself. You end up with a mixed message. And we know that confusion kills freedom like no other. And we know that killed freedom means killed peace, means killed happiness. Today on Freedom Friday, as we are learning about let's kill the ego, the truth will set you free. We've heard this many times. The truth will set you free. Free from comparing yourself to others. Free to go after what you want. Free from being emotionally affected by words. The truth will set you free. The truth about art, truth about the human spirit, to look effortless, but it takes effort in order to kill the ego so that we can actually be effortless. As what the real effort that we're expending most of the time is simply the effort that it takes for the ego to battle with the real you. But we kill the ego, and now the real you can effortlessly live. Although we will still have problems, we will be in the moment and not concerning ourselves with previous patterns that we might be afraid of that are in our imagination, or future hypothetical futures that we're trying to avoid, which for all we know might not even happen. For all we know might not even happen, and so we could just live in the present moment. The truth will set you free, but is it just any truth? Or is it the truth about yourself that you must learn to be free of? The truth will set you free, but it's not any old truth out there like 5 + 5 = 10, or that the Philippine flag has blue, red, yellow, and white, or the fact that Albert Einstein came up with such and such amount of theories. Not the truths out there that will set you free, but the truths about yourself will set you free, as in this ego. The truth about your ego, the truth about what you're afraid of, the truth about how your ego is built or what your ego is made of, by discovering what you are afraid of and how your ego has created a version of you that is built off of what you're afraid of. The more truth you learn about that, the easier it is to discourage the ego from controlling your world, as we all know that all thoughts are lies. That statement confused me for a little while, but now I do see, as we are integrating, and as I do see now and realize that all thoughts are lies. You want to stay out of your head as we kill our ego. So what does your brain focus on? Well, observing the sense of self. There is effort that we should expend, but is not outwards towards the world, but rather inwards towards ourself, towards our ego. How do we kill this ego? How do we stay out of our own head? Well, we stay in the moment. How do we stay in the moment? What is the most true thing that only exists in the present moment? Well, your body. As we observe our sense of self in order to kill this ego, we hold our controller properly in order to stay in the moment, to resist the temptation of the ego, which is all in the mind. To resist the temptation of the ego, which is all in the mind, we focus not on the mind, although we will observe and let these thoughts wash over us. In order to resist the temptation of the ego, which exists all in the mind, we take our attention away from the mind, but rather the whole body, not the compartmentalized individual part of the mind where the ego is, but we allow those to exist, but spread our awareness onto the entire whole of us instead of on the mind, by remaining present in the body, by feeling integrated into our body in its truths, like how the weight-bearing portion of the spine is in the front, not the back. Back is meant to house the nerves and also allow flexibility of the spine movement. The back of the spine distinct from the front of the spine, although they are the same spine. So I hope you are allowing yourself to allow the weight of the body being delivered down the front of the spine and into those rainbow arches at all times, because we do not sit on our legs and we observe our sense of self. And how does that feel for you? We stay in the moment to kill the ego. As the ego exists in the mind, we stay in the moment by focusing on what is the moment itself, which is the body. The mind is like imagination, future, and past, and all these emotions that come with it. That is what the ego is, and that's how it uses your mind to think about the futures and the past, to anticipate the future based on the past. But as we're killing the ego, we stay out of our mind and stay on the whole body. We stay out of the mind. All thoughts are lies, because we should be paying attention to the body and watch as the body reacts like a canvas. As the entire world splashes its paint onto the canvas, we can observe how the body is feeling and expend effort towards staying out of our mind and staying focused on the body in the present moment and allowing life to happen on its own. As in, the body will move on its own as we remember to leave the swallowing muscles alone. We are simply observers. Here on Freedom Friday, we're going to feel so free. We're going to leave you with this. What identities? We're going to leave you with this question. A little question before we use one last body magic trick to head on us out. What identities and behavior patterns are, or parts, quote unquote, of your personalities were formed by this ego? As we feel so free on this Freedom Friday and embark into the weekend, this morning here on Friday, November 18th, 2022, a Freedom Friday, as we were talking about let's kill the ego, we ask, now that we've talked about what the ego is and why we should kill it and how, let's take a moment to observe our sense of self, observe our own ego, as we know that the truth about ourselves will set us free as we can learn to deal with those parts of ourselves. We say, what identities and behavior patterns, or quote unquote parts of your identity or of your personality were formed by this ego, this fear? What identities and behavior patterns or parts of your personality were formed by this ego? Are we able to identify those? Or does it feel blurry still? We hope that you have felt so good from the inside out, had as much fun as we did on the Best Feeling Podcast and the Best Feeling Network. We hope you are allowing all these words to go in one ear and out the other, as we are letting this podcast blend into the symphony of sounds that is the world around you, always staying present in that beautiful godlike body of yours, remembering that all thoughts are lies as we stay out of our own head and stay onto our whole body. How? By holding our controller properly today. Simply using the energy that we expend on the outside world, simply reversing that and using that on the inside world now. And and just checking with ourselves to see where we're placing our balance. Are we remembering that we do not sit on our legs? Are you remembering to pretend that there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out? It's just flickering there. You're not thinking about inhaling or exhaling necessarily, simply that there's a candle in front of your lips that you're trying to not put out. And how does that feel for you as we observe our sense of self? How does that feel for you as you observe your sense of self? As you stay out of your thoughts and stay in the present moment. The future is unwritten, and our relationship to feeling so good from the inside out definitely does affect the future. So this hypothetical future that you're afraid of, will it even manifest? If we are staying out of our own head and staying onto our body by listening to the front of the shins, like they're the tuning forks of all those sounds around you as we stay present in this moment. Never leave the moment, even though we are coming through your ears in this podcast. We hope you'll stay in the moment, allow these sounds to blend into the symphony of sounds around you. So that you can stay out of your head, stay out of your imagination in the best way possible by staying focused on what is physically true, manifestly true. You stay out of your own thoughts, you stay out of your head, you stay out of your mind by staying onto the body, which is the most present, whereas your mind and ego are the least present. Always calculating the past, calculating the future. Both places are impossible to be, but the present is where you are always forced to be, and you will never be anywhere else. As the present, your body is right here, right now. We hope that you'll spread your sweet awareness towards your body, your sweet hearing awareness to the front of your shins. And remember to leave your swallowing muscles alone as we conclude this week. We will see you next week on Mover Monday, here on the Best Feeling Podcast, the Best Feeling Network, your only no-nonsense podcast, with your host, Herbie. This is Pagawan. Big love. Guys, don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to tell all your friends. Do it or else. Do it or else. Subscribe right now. Big love. See you next time.